Very good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and it's a Thursday, so we have our two Thursday night guests. We've got Malcolm MacDonald and John Gibson. Hi, lads.
Hello, Steve. Hi, John.
Hi, Kate. How are you, mate? Hi, pals.
Good to see you, lads. Good to see you. And we're going to start off with a little byline in the Chronicle tonight by Lee Ryder. A little story there, just following on from that big Toon survey, which obviously makes interesting reading. I just want to focus on Steve Bruce because he's given an interview to Lee at the Chronicle. And just to remind people, if they hadn't seen the survey, 54% of supporters believed that Steve Bruce had delivered a performance that was expected. 41% felt that the ex-Man United skipper had exceeded expectations, with only 5% suggesting he fell below what was anticipated when he's appointed. So following off the back of those results, Steve Bruce gave a short, concise interview, but more or less saying that these days what goes out the window is the word respect. I hope people can look at it and say, fair play to him, he's done okay. Let's not bullshit ourselves, though. We've only done okay. I think in many people's minds, I wasn't capable of even being okay, though. So, in that respect, and it has been difficult all along through it, I have looked to keep making the team better and keep improving. As I've said many times, I only want what is best for the club. And then looking ahead to the start of the new season and a potentially slashed transfer budget, he went on to say, it's going to be a difficult summer in terms of it only being a short break. Before we know it, it will be back upon us. Let's take stock and see exactly where we are. My job is simply to keep improving, and I will be doing my utmost to do so. In response to a question on failing to better the previous season 45-point tally, which of course was something which a lot of networks chose to have throughout the season, the race between Rafa's point total and Bruce, he said it's where you finish. To have seen teams below us at the start of it, I might have accepted it. Going forward, we can't. We have to improve and get better. We can't be happy with this. And that's it, really. He's not really come out with a great deal more. What's your take on that, Malcolm, first of all?
Where do I start with all that you've said? But what I would say is, yes, Steve Bruce, I think he did well. But the question is not what he's done last season, but what he's going to do next season. He's got to improve on what we saw last season. Otherwise, we're going to be in a relegation dogfight again until close to the end of the season, and that's what I was disappointed in. It was what he didn't say in that piece with Lee Ryder. You know, he hasn't said we are looking to improve vastly next season. We're looking at this. We're looking at that. You know, and I think he kept shy about bringing transfers in. So I doubt that he's got very much to spend by way of the transfer market.
Yep. John, what's your take on that?
Well, when we say, what was it, 5% said that he hadn't done worse than expected. I mean, what was expected when Steve Bruce arrived here was relegation. So obviously he did better than that because he kept this up. And from that point of view, he did well. It's all about, Steve, where you put the bar, isn't it? It was the bar that if you stay up, you've been a success. If that was where the bar was, it was a success. If the bar was higher than that you either improve on the previous season or your performances are excellent, etc., then it wasn't a success. But yes, I think we'll accept. Steve often uses the word respect, and I can understand that because there has been a lack of that. That is something he had to fight against from day one. But there again, on his appointment, he knew it would be like that. He was replacing Rafa Benitez, who the fans had seen has been forced out of the club by an owner that they disliked intensely. He was then branded as the owner's boy, if you like. So he was always pushing the steamroller uphill. And I don't think that's going to change an awful lot in the future. It's going to be tough for Steve Bruce, but it's the law of football. I mean, he walked out on Sheffield Wednesday to come to Newcastle United. Now, we can understand as a Geordie, Sheffield people are going absolutely crackers and saying deserter. He had that earlier in his life. I think, funnily enough, with the other Sheffield, where that was the situation. I mean, the bottom line is that we often have a second season syndrome with any manager whatsoever when the honeymoon period's over and we then go into things have settled down. What are we going to get? Yes, it's unquestionably very difficult for Steve Bruce because he's working under Mike Ashley, and it's very difficult for anybody working under Mike Ashley. It was very difficult for Houghton and Benitez, who were two good quality managers. So it is going to be difficult. But quite frankly, if we continue under Mike Ashley with Steve Bruce in the chair, no transfer funds, until the new owner comes in, it's going to be a tough season anyway. And what horrifies me, I don't want to start a new season with deep in my heart the belief that if we stay up, what a relief that is. What a way that is to go into a new season. And yet, Geordies right now, I believe, are feeling like that.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with both your sentiments. But let's see how things pan out. Of course, everyone's still expecting a takeover, and we're not sure. But go on, Malcolm. Yeah. Finish off that point.
One thing that I would mention on Steve's behalf, I think, and that is that a manager always wants and certainly needs the backing of his chairman. How much is Mike Ashley actually backing Steve? Is he just there because he's cheap, he doesn't ask for too much, he's just thankful to have the job? Or is he going to go banging on the door and saying, I need transfer funds and I want them now, I need to bring in new players and I want to get quality? And I'm not seeing that, and so I just have, because most of the sides in the Premiership are going to seek to improve during this break in the transfer market. Is Newcastle going to do the same, or are they going to get left behind yet again?
Yeah, it's a big concern, guys. It really is, and obviously the takeover is paramount to all of that. And we've entered into what most newspaper journalists have described as a new phase. We're led to believe that the consortium has pulled out, and that there's obviously now discussions going on behind the scenes. The silence has been deafening from everyone this week. I think we've had nothing from Richard Masters. No surprise there. We've had nothing from the buyer or the selling side. We've seen various newspaper articles and seen, a little bit of coverage on television networks. But John, it's almost as if we're standing still, waiting for news from somebody just to put us out of our misery.
Yeah, absolutely right, Steve. The situation, as far as I'm concerned, is that I know it's tough, but we need the fans to carry the fight to the MPs and the MPs to carry the fight to the Premier League. Because believe you me, if the fans hadn't responded the way they did, the NUFC, and if the MPs hadn't responded to the fans the way they did, this would now be officially dead. It would be dead and over and not happening. It is still... The pot is still boiling because of the fans and because of the MPs. And there's no question, I think, Steve, that the consortium, this was their ploy. They were gambling on this being so, that the Geordies taking up the cudgel would keep the thing live. The question now is, can we, the royal we being Geordies, pressurise the Premier League enough to get some sort of result. And the first attempt towards a result would be getting them to actually talk and open up about what has been going on. I think that is going to be a huge problem. They think silence is golden. That is their rule, not our rule, that silence is golden. It is anything but. But they are, I'm told, absolutely terrified about talking about this situation, because they think the moment they open their mouths, they're laying themselves open to being sued. Because on one side, you've got Ashley having his lawyers hovering around, waiting to say, oh, that's why you stopped me getting me 300 million. We're going to do you. And on the other side, you've got Qatar's lawyers hovering around saying, so you're not really looking after us on the piracy thing, we will sue. So they were hoping that if the consortium went away, the problem would go away. The problem hasn't gone away because the consortium have handled it so well, and Geordies who are sick to death have been put on, have said we're going to be put on no longer, and they've taken up to fight the good fight. The thing now is, can we, the royal we being the fans, the MPs and everyone concerned, keep the pressure on enough to force the Premier League either to reopen the situation or to start talking about it against their will? It's a shame at the moment that it's a parliamentary recess. It is not sitting, because that stops the MPs going and demanding that certain things happen. I think it's absolutely inevitable that the new season will start under Ashley, and this is still going to be something of a long haul. But what's our alternative? If we don't keep pushing, the alternative is Ashley for an eternity, because I've got no faith, I'll say it yet again, in the American consortium situation. And anyway, a new consortium sends us back 3 months factor-wise to catch up to where we are now. So the pressure has got to stay on. The question is, do the Premier League crack or do they not?
So Malcolm, following on from what John said there, and listening to it, the way John explains it in simple layman's terms, is that the Premier League are obviously concerned about legal battles on both sides. So the natural assumption to make here would be the reason that there's been silence is potentially the buyer, the seller, and the Premier League could all be sitting down and talking about this, and the Qataris and BN Sports, and trying to find a solution to this impasse.
They could, but I don't think the Premier League want to do that. I think the Premier League were more than delighted when the consortium walked away. They don't have to say a word
have
now.
Have they walked away, or is this a clever ruse on their behalf?
It certainly appears that they've walked away, and the Premier League will say they have walked away.
Premier League don't say anything.
Premier League will say nothing.
But within the walls of the Premier League, they will be saying, I know
what you mean, Malcolm. Yeah,
they've walked away. So let's not do anything. Let's not say anything. It isn't anything to do with us anymore. The situation has disappeared. To all
that's why I'm
the
saying,
case,
Malcolm, we've got to keep the pressure on to force them. You see, we do underestimate in a lot of things the power of the people. We do underestimate that, and it can be quite strong. And if we go back from a totally different situation to this in a way, but basically similar, the takeover before last, when John Hall moved in to Newcastle United, was fan power. Actually, I was part of that original Magpie group that took on the Newcastle United board. There was a different way of going about it, because then you just had to buy up the shares of that took some doing, and it took 2 years. But it was a different approach. But it was fan power against current owners that brought about that huge change, and it can happen again. There's all over the world on things that aren't football.
This
player
time,
power
John,
can work.
But this time, John,
Yeah.
surely the fan power and Mike Ashley are working together.
Because it's quite staggering, isn't it? Because
both parties want
going
the same results.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And of course, the Premier League have been able to hide behind this confidentiality clause, which was right. And they would possibly say now, well, it's still because it's gone beyond that situation, because it's now open house. Anybody can bid for Newcastle United. The time is run out. But they would love to hang behind that and say nothing. They desperately want to say nothing. And as Malcolm said, when they saw the consortium walk away officially, what a relief. You could almost hear the sigh of relief up here. It is boomeranged on them that we up here have been unwilling to accept that. And therefore we've... Well, Lola's barking up the wrong tree there by the sound of it, Malcolm. But,
it's a classic.
But they can't hide behind this anymore, because if we stay with them, we're going to force something somewhere, whether it'll turn out in our favour or not. But let's look at another way. We ain't got much option. The only chance we've got. Malcolm's come back. He's barking up the tree.
Yeah, I do.
He said he was barking up the wrong. He said he was barking up the wrong tree, Malcolm. He got a gag in while you were away.
Not for you, John.
You feed me all my best times, mate.
Peter Robson says, he says, who let the dogs out? Malcolm did. Good stuff. Ashley's got a faucet, says David Mortem, and a lot of people saying who let the dogs out, which is great. There's, I don't know whether you guys have seen, but on the internet, some of the fans have taken it upon themselves to set up a funding page. Now, I've had a look into it, guys, and I'm a bit concerned about this. I've got to be perfectly honest. War Fund Me page is asking for £500,000 on one of these platforms to try and raise enough money to have a legal fight, to support the takeover. It's a little bit crazy, really. And Malcolm, it's not the kind of distraction we need, is it? When, lawyers have been paid handsomely for the last, 17, 18 weeks by the buyer and seller to try and get this deal coming, to try and get this deal done. What John's basically saying is correct. Pressure on the MPs, etc., has certainly led to somewhere, but we're not sure where yet.
Well, yes, and I fully support John in what he says there, because I'm just looking at the comment there. That is funny. That put me off my stride.
By the way, that's a compliment. That's not a compliment, Malcolm. The snail outside is faster than Joe Linton.
Yeah. Yes, I think, and I have always thought throughout all of this, that the government want the deal to go through. They want to have those close ties with Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of business to be done, and the government have got to look at things in that way. And I think that they would be very sorry that it fell short on this occasion. And I think the government would support putting some fresh life into the whole situation.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, John, I mean, fans asking for money, it never really goes down well amongst the fan base, does it? I mean, a lot of people twist their face when they're asked to pay £1 to join the supporters trust, but people are asking for £500,000 for a campaign. I mean, it's not reality, is it?
No, it is unrealistic. I can understand in its purest sense the theory behind it, the thinking behind it, in its purest sense. But when you think if fans were going to raise what is a colossal amount of money. And if they did, the Premier League and that matter, the consortium in Ashley have so much dough, they could sit tight and just drain us out of the water, couldn't they? Because our money, I'm talking about fans, would only go so far. Their money's almost limitless. So you really can't win that way. I honestly believe that. That is not the route to go down. The pressure is the route to go down, which is the route that's currently happening. And going back to what Malcolm said, and I think it is interesting, I think Malcolm was saying, yes, you know, they have stepped away officially and withdrawn an offer. I think that the consortium have gambled. They've looked at the situation, decided that on their own, they cannot get this past the Premier League any longer. They have tried for 3 months or whatever it was. They've exhausted all avenues. The only avenue left is the public opinion in the Northeast. And they've deliberately gambled on withdrawing the offer and letting for Northeast take over and drive it on from there. I think that has been their way of handling this situation. I think it's probably the only game left in town. And I think if this doesn't work, then nothing will work with this particular consortium. But I don't think it's dead in the water yet, because people power is quite an incredible thing and never fails to surprise me at what it can achieve. I go from cynicism when something first starts and saying this is too big an ask, to realizing the possibility of very quickly of what can be achieved by the man in the street, and ought to be achieved by the man in the street, because he is normally the last one considered by football in general and by Newcastle United in particular.
Question for both of you on the screen there. Can Malcolm or John shed any light on my first match? Midweek 1975. I think I was 5. Dad took me because there was an ex-players match before kickoff. I think it was Newcastle versus Sunderland. I seem to remember it was foggy. Does that ring a bell with anybody?
Now,
well, it should with Malcolm, because he'd be playing.
Yeah, possibly, John.
Malcolm, did it?
I'm just wondering if this was a game prior to a testimonial, and so there were 2 games.
I understand. I understand where you're coming from there. Yeah.
You know that maybe
that's a sort of
it was Sunderland and Newcastle ex-players followed by current players. So there were 2 games. That's ringing a bell.
75, we would be talking probably, Malcolm, wouldn't we, the end of Joe Harvey's reign as manager, because he had the 74 Cup final and it was Gordon Lee by the 76 League Cup final.
That's right, yeah. And Joe was the manager through the 74-75 season. Yeah.
Wasn't a benefit match for Tony Green or something like that, was it?
It could well have been, actually. Yeah.
Monks didn't have one when he deserted us for Sunday, did he? No, I don't think he did.
I don't know.
He didn't have a benefit.
So. No. No.
Well, I don't think we've solved it there, but I would have a look into it.
To me,
Here's a question to you, Gibbo. Where does the current squad as it stands rank against some of the worst you've seen in your time covering the club?
Well, all I've seen in my time covering, it's easier to remember the good times because there's about 3 seasons that were absolutely thoroughly enjoyable. We've had some terrible ones. I mean, you've got to remember that we actually went to the depths of going into the old 3rd division. If you remember, in the last game of Kevin Keegan, when he first came into the club, we had to win at Leicester. Remember, Steve, on the last day of the season to stop us going into the old 3rd division. So how bad was that? I remember under McGarry in the 2nd division when Bobby Shinton was the top scorer with 8 goals. Mind you, that was when we think this season, Shelby's the top scorer with 6 goals. So in the leagues, I mean, it is pretty mundane. It has worse. But my main argument, and it was a good question from the guy, but my main argument is not, is this the worst ever, but aren't we sick of continual dross? We should not be sitting season after season after season saying, is this slightly worse than 1980 whatever, or slightly better than 1998 or whatever. That is all we do. We can't remember the only one season we've had under Mike Ashley there was anything near being acceptable was when we finished 5th in that absolute freak, having been in the lower half of the league the season before and quickly returned to the lower half of the season, the league the next season. That is all we've had. We know when we last won things. You've got to be my flipping age to have been around when it happened. I mean, we are absolutely sick of that, and we've got to lift ourselves away from that. We're not going to do it next season under Mike Ashley, and I'm not blaming Steve Bruce for that because it'll be Mike Ashley, as it always has been. We need a new owner before we can start looking upwards instead of looking downwards.
Fair play. Peter Robson says, Malcolm, question to the panel. Hand on heart, if this was a top 4 club, would it have been passed by now? So, Malcolm, I'll let you answer that.
Yes, I think that there is a cartel building at the top of the Premier League, and I don't think that they want any new entrants. So Liverpool and Tottenham, they made their anti-feelings well known, and I think that there were others as well. That it's almost becoming the Premier League is almost becoming 2 separate divisions, and we've got to be very, very careful that that doesn't succeed. But money talks, power talks, and at the moment, all of the money is in the top 6 or 7, and all the power seems to be there as well. That they are the people who play in Europe, and they talk with UEFA, they talk with the Premier League far more than the Newcastle United, for example, and all the other clubs are around.
Yeah, Barry Hogan, thanks
Malcolm,
for that.
you're absolutely correct. Sorry, yeah, I was just going to say, just taking this up, and Barry Hogan, well done you and coming out with answers to that question. Just on what Malcolm was saying there about the cartel at the top, one of the things I've found very distasteful about us getting knocked back is the influence behind the scenes of the so-called Elite Six trying to keep us down. And what they are scared of, they're terrified. They should just look after their own house, and to heck with else. And a vibrant league is what is good for football in this country. They want to make it a closed shop. And they look at the situation, and what do they see? They see Wolves suddenly looking very good. Leicester suddenly looking very good. Sheffield United, a little bit floating around there. And then they look at Arsenal, who, but for winning the FA Cup, would have been out of Europe completely, and they think that could be us. Arsenal could be us. And what if Wolves become established? What if Leicester become established season after season? One of us has got to leave the elite club. They don't need another threat to the Elite Six, which would be Newcastle United with a takeover. And that business of just looking after you is exactly what is wrong with top-class football, top-flight football these days.
Getting on to players, Miles has said Callum Wilson for 20 million, Hendrickson, Fraser on free, so Matty Longstaff out, give him the deal that Bentaleb had with wages, and then focus on a couple of wing backs with around £15 million left. Realistic, or lads? Malcolm, what's your take on that?
Well, nobody can really know quite what is going on. Does anybody know what is in the kitty for Steve Bruce to spend? I'm seeing a guy saying, "Oh, there's 20 million to spend on one player that he's mentioned." Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not so sure that Newcastle United have got 20 million to spend in the whole of this summer.
Yeah. John, have you got any indication of how much Steve Bruce has got to spend?
Well, the word that he's been given is that it's between 30 and 35 million for the whole squad, for all these signings, not one, which is less than was spent on Joe Linton last summer, and 10 mil more than was spent on Almere in the previous January. And by the way, we'll all believe that when we see the money being spent. How often are we told at the beginning of a summer closed season there's X, Y, and Z to be spent, and then we end up at the end of the closed season getting a couple of free transfer guys and a couple of guys on loan. I can understand some of the loan signings that have been mentioned there, and supposing for the moment, Malcolm, that there was 30 million in the kitty. Now, does that buy you a quality centre forward? Maybe yes, maybe no. But then, have you nothing left for elsewhere? And the main problem is centre forward, but there's bags of problems elsewhere that have got to be addressed. So how do you go about that in terms of going down the route Ashley loves, which is loan transfers or free transfers?
John, I know, because in talking about a figure of 35 million, it ain't much. Particularly if you've got to spread it out over the whole squad, it isn't much at all. And you're not even talking bringing quality in with that kind of money. Manchester United, right now, they are considering spending in excess of 100 million on a player. That's 3 times that amount, for heaven's sake. Now, and there is the difference. It is absolutely massive when Man United are talking of spending that much for one player, and Steve Bruce has got 35 million pounds to spend on his whole squad. And well, you can see where the gap's coming, isn't it? Money talks, and it's sort of like top 6, top 7, and the also rans who make up the opposition. And I'm surprised that, though, in all fairness, in all honesty, that Mike Ashley has actually come up with a figure of 35 million. I really am. After what has recently happened, I would have thought that he become quite disinterested in the whole thing.
A lot of people suggesting that £35 million includes the wages, lads.
Oh, it could well do, and I suspect that it's all right saying this 30. This is cushioning the blow that it's not a realistic target. And by the way, that's top what 35 million. It could include wages, signing on fees, the whole kit and caboodle. What we know is it's not good enough to make Newcastle that much better than they are already, because we're talking about Premier League buying Premier League class, and everything is crying out to the fact that unless something changes, we're going in exactly the same position as we were a year ago, i.e. fighting to survive, and then if we do survive, expected to be grateful.
Yep, and that's horrendous. David Tweed asks, do you think if Hendrick signs, that opens the exit door for Hayden? I'd like to see them play together and tighten the centre midfield up. I mean, Malcolm, the big concern, of course, during any transfer window is that players could go, and Hayden's one that you would probably want to keep a hold of, as is Alan St. Maximin and Martin Dubravka. But if there's an offer comes in, who's to say Mike Ashley won't try and capitalise?
Very true. And I think he would. And then let Steve Bruce sort of try and sort it out. I'm not sure what it is that people are seeing in Hayden. I'm really not. I'm not seeing it at all myself. And that if he, I personally don't see him doing a great deal in each game, and I think maybe you can get away with it in the Championship, but for me it needs an awful lot more in the centre of the park. It really does, than what Hayden's offering.
Yeah, it's a worry, isn't it, John, that we could be losing players?
Oh, it's a massive worry, because if we lose people like St. Maximin or Dubravka, etc., because necessary not to get us into the top half of the table, but to make certain we don't go down, is to add some decent players to go with them, not for them to disappear from over the Tyne Bridge and away south somewhere. That is the worry. And it is a massive, massive worry. The worry also is, that if we continue down this path of living from hand to mouth, people like St. Maximin are going to get very disillusioned with a club that apparently lacks ambition, and is going to look to take to his toes. I mean, he hasn't even got the benefit of being a Geordie, so we might have heartstrings. Though Geordies, once they see a lack of ambition in Newcastle, don't have heartstrings. Matty Longstaff has left us, and he has left us because his contract's up. Whether he came back instead of going to another club is a different thing. But as today, he's left. And what'll be is in Gascoigne, the wonderful threesome we had, bailed out because Newcastle United were going nowhere but into the second division, which is exactly what happened. So we can't expect somebody like Alan St. Maximin, who's had 1 year here, to suddenly care for us so much he will put up with any sort of loss if the club showing a total lack of ambition and signing nobody. We've got to get over this hump and get good players in. And as Malcolm has already said, if we've got to get good players in, unless we get dead lucky, got somebody with an eye for talent in the way that Joe Harvey had, or Kevin Keegan, and Joe Harvey got them for peanuts. Kevin Keegan got top stars bought off the top shelf. Unless we have that, we're in trouble.
Yeah, I'd agree. Bizwajit says, question for Malcolm, don't you think instead of a striker, we should focus on bringing a quality playmaker like Bruno Fernandes, even if it requires us spending the entire budget on that player? What's your take on that?
I think it's self-defeating to spend all of the money on just one player. One player doesn't make a team. And I think that Newcastle certainly need to strengthen up front. They certainly need to strengthen in midfield. But I feel that they also probably need to strengthen at the back as well. You look back over the recent matches, and a lot of centre halves were out injured. Now, are they going to be reliable for next season? Only the medical people within the club are able to answer that, and I hope that Steve Bruce is actually asking that question. But just to bring one player in. You know, if I were that player and I sat down with Steve Bruce, who I knew was looking to bring me in to sign me via transfer, I would say, who else is coming in? How else are you strengthening the side? Who am I going to be playing with? What kind of a side is it that you're going to be putting me in? And if all the money is spent on just that one player, Steve Bruce has probably got to be quite honest and say, well, you're the only one that's coming in, pal.
Yeah.
And the fella really wouldn't have any interest if that is the scope of Newcastle's ambition. Bring one good player in.
Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of people talking about Mitrovic, Malcolm. Just a quick one. Mitrovic, of course, a former striker of this parish. What was your view on him? And people asking, do you think he'll score? Do you think he'll score goals next season for Fulham? Do you think he's a changed character?
I think he's learnt somewhat, and he has changed, and perhaps for the better. I still think that he'll find the Premiership a big step too far. But I saw an attitude from him that I didn't like at all. And if you look very carefully at all the goals that he scored for Fulham, there are not many of them that were crucial goals. You know, in crucial matches, you know, that he can sort of score the third and the fourth goal in a 4-0 victory. But is he always going to be getting you the first goal? That's what I look for. That's what Alan Shearer looked for, is to be the main man in the box, to get the first and the second goal, get the side in the lead. And then if other people want to come in the box and have a go, fine, because you're well on top, having, you know, put yourself 2-0 up. Mitrovic, I'm not so sure that he really puts himself out when it really matters.
Yeah, John, same question to you, just about Mitrovic. He played for Newcastle, and you know, I mean, I've got to agree with Malcolm. I mean, he wasn't my favourite player, but God, I would much prefer him than Joe Linton.
Well, fair point. I mean, I would really back both those things. The biggest problem he had up here was discipline-wise. He led everything with the elbow. He thought he wanted to be done. The fans would love him if he physically and literally killed the centre half, etc., etc. So he was a walking red card. That was a major problem. And I don't think he's the best, but I tell you one thing. I bet next season he scores not only more than 2 goals, which are number 9, who I don't want to name because we talk about him too much, but a number 9 scored this season 2 goals. I bet he scores more than that. And I bet he scores at least 1 more than the 6 goals our top goal scorer in the Premier League got in the season just ended. I think that is true. But yet, there's got to be something that's better. But I think he has learned. I think the traits are still in him, but he will score more goals than 6. That total, and by the way, that's not a go at John Joe Shelby, because in the position he plays, he did very, very well to get 6. It's a go at the people that played in front of Shelby that couldn't get more than 6. He don't get more than 6, we're in big trouble. Mitrovic for Fulham, who might well be relegated again, who knows, but he'll score more than 6.
Yeah, a lot of people asking if we could have Rondon back. Bravo Mo says that he's still scoring goals in China, but we should never have let him go, really, Malcolm. Rondon.
I would agree with you. He lacked a bit of pace, but he held the ball up well and worked well with others running off him and around him. One person that hasn't been mentioned, and that's Dwight Gale. Dwight Gale, if he has the full confidence within himself, can score a lot of goals in the Premiership. He needs the right guy alongside of him. He needs a big fella who's going to be taking the centre halves on and looking to flick it on for Dwight Gale to use his pace. Dwight Gale reads that brilliantly, and so I personally would be looking to find that guy who would be a good front man for Dwight Gale to be making his runs off of, and that I think would be successful, and it would probably be bringing sort of between the two of them in excess of 30 goals.
Ivan Toney, John, did he get a fair crack at the whip at Newcastle? He's scoring goals now, albeit at a lower level.
No, I think he probably didn't. I think sometimes we are too keen to jettison young players very early on and say, you know, that's the end of that. You can now go. We do that very quickly. I was worried about Woodman, for example, in that sphere, and luckily we've talked about new contract. But we seem to have kids. Then we give them a new contract and send them out on loan. Give them a new contract, send them. And then eventually, somewhere along the line, when they come back after about 3 lots of loans, we say goodbye. Ivan Toney wasn't given a real chance. There's absolutely no question about that. And it could come back to haunt us because he would be a physical presence up there. He has got a finishing ability. And as Malcolm said, what we need, and I take Malcolm's point that Gale would only look a possible quality Premier League player at Newcastle if he had a big number 9 with him, because I don't think he has often been asked to play. Certainly if Benitez was here, we only played 1 up front. He can't lead the line on his own at all. That's not his game. He's got to play off a tall, big striker. Andy Carroll is not available often enough because of injuries to be that man.
It would be great if he was, John.
We've got to bring somebody in. Sorry?
It would be great if Andy Carroll was fit, because he would do that job absolutely brilliantly. There would be a perfect combination. But
yeah. It would be
game in, game out, game in, game. You know.
Yeah,
it would be great. It would be great if I look like Cary Grant. That's life. The guy,
not in his current state, John.
Malcolm, it would be good if you lost 2 stone, your hair was still black, you had no glasses, because you would murder the blinking centre halves today. But unfortunately, that's gone, and I feel, unfortunately, it's gone for Andy Carroll. We're living on the myth that Andy Carroll, because he looks the same physically, you know, the hair and the build, and is the guy that was at Newcastle originally. He is not.
Yeah, you're right. Sadly, yeah. I wish he was, but he is.
Sadly, very sadly. Very sadly, Malcolm.
Yeah.
Coming round to the last 10 minutes of the programme, guys, and Malcolm did mention the legend, like himself earlier on, Big Alan Shearer. He's turned 50 today.
Yeah.
Gibbo, never have we seen, in recent times, it has to be said, someone who got what the number 9 shirt meant and, you know, could put the ball in the back of the net. Of course, the Premier League's top goal scorer, but, you know, came back to put himself in the record books alongside Jackie Milburn, Malcolm MacDonald, and, of course, Hughie Gallagher, Len White. You know, there's been so many great people in that shirt. And he did it. He lived the boyhood dream. He didn't win a trophy, sadly, but he lived the boyhood dream, and, you know, he still sits at the top of that table.
There's no question about that. A great centre forward. I mean, at 17, he was making his debut in the top flight for Southampton, not against any old up, against Arsenal, and scoring a hat-trick. that tells you the quality that's coming. He won the Premier League, his only major medal in club football, with a club like Blackburn, who were not one of the historically clubs. He come to Newcastle and turned down Manchester United for 2 reasons. One, because it was the club in his heart, and two, because Newcastle had just finished runners-up to Manchester United in the Premier League, and he honestly believed that this club would go on and win the title. The fact that halfway through the next season, Kevin Keegan took to his toes was an absolute killer, and a killer for Alan, because the dream sort of went, the entertainer's dream went through the door with Kevin Keegan. But he stayed on, and he may not have won what he'd wished to win with Newcastle United, but he is so proud of being the greatest goal scorer in Newcastle's all-time history and taking over from another Geordie legend like Jackie Milburn. He is the real deal. What real deal, still is the real deal. And talking about another planet as compared with what we've just been talking about what Newcastle United might or might not need to be able to survive. The reason that Newcastle United never had a problem in the league table looking downwards when Alan Shearer was here, it was his goals guaranteed that United. Malcolm McDonald's goals guaranteed that Newcastle United would never be relegated. When you've got a 30-goal a season man, you don't go down. And we had those players, and we need them desperately again. Happy birthday to the big man. He served us proud. He mightn't have won many medals here, but by he won hearts.
Sure, and I would join you in wishing him a very, very happy 50th birthday. And what we must also remember is that when Alan Shearer came to Newcastle, Newcastle United broke the world record transfer fee. How far are we away from that now?
Oh.
Yeah, what a sad indictment! What a sad indictment! Sad indictment, and loads of tributes coming in for Big Al. Happy birthday to him! I've been lucky enough, to work with a lot of legends, as has John. We've both interviewed Alan Shearer on stage, and it's always a pleasure to be on with him, just as it is when we go out and do shows with Malcolm. And these people are part of our history, our proud history, and unfortunately, over the last 13 years, we haven't had many players who could join that list. Let's hope that a forthcoming takeover will see those kind of days return. But as I say, we're coming into the last 6 or 7 minutes, lads, and just a lot of the comments tonight have been about whether you think the deal could be done anyway. This is a suggestion that was put forward, I know, by John Woff from the Magpie Club. The Magpie Group, when he's on the show a couple of weeks ago, that essentially the deal could just be done between Ashley and the consortium, and that the Premier League would have to pick up the pieces. Malcolm, you're shaking your head, so we'll come to you.
No.
You just think that couldn't be done?
Because the deal cannot be completed until they do the fit and proper persons test.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely true, Malcolm. The difference is, Steve, that in the days, because I worked with John on the Magpie Group, and John was fabulous, and people don't realize how much input John Woff had in getting all the shares for the original Magpie Group, the takeover before last. But in 2004, the Premier League introduced this fit persons test, allegedly to stop clubs being exploited by these scrupulous owners, and therefore fans being exploited. How incredible is that? Because that is now what is blocking the Newcastle United takeover. Unfortunately, and Malcolm is absolutely right, what it didn't apply in my day alongside John Woff and Alan Rooney and Peter Ratcliffe and Malcolm Dix when we were part of the John Hall's Magpie Group. But it does apply now. You cannot buy. It's no good the consortium going straight to Ashley, buying the share Ashley, and then going as a fait accompli, because the league will not sanction that Newcastle United to go ahead under that ownership, because you've got to have your passport rubber stamped by them. And if they won't rubber stamp it, nobody's going to spend 300 million pounds on buying a club and then told, sorry, you can't operate it. You buy it. It's like, you know, you do a deal to buy your house, but you then get a surveyor in to make certain it's sound. And without the surveyor, you shouldn't buy the house. You're not allowed to buy the house by the Premier League unless you get their agreement. Now, when you look at that ruling, I think there's only about, and it's not just the Premier League, it's in the English League, the National League, and the Scottish Premier League. There's only about one consortium, I think, has ever been turned down. The Southampton ones were, but they appealed and they won the appeal. Only one consortium, I think some guys from Donny or something weren't allowed to buy Donkers. They haven't gone round turning people down. All of a sudden, and they would say, well, we haven't turned the Saudis down. They made flipping certain that it would last long enough till everybody got sick and the whole thing hit an impasse. The whole thing stinks, but the goalposts have been moved. And sadly, the loophole, well, it wasn't a loophole when we were there. It was the way it happened. It took 2 years of fighting to get this thing through, but there wasn't the final obstacle that there is today. And that obstacle cannot be overcome any other way than the rubber stamp from the Premier League.
Yeah, Malcolm, it's a lot of comments coming in about this. Barry Mitchelson, he's saying, what is that to stop them buying shares and invest along with Ashley, and then in time Ashley selling the shares? I mean, with a lot of these things, there is always going to be a loophole, Malcolm. Do you think that's why, you know, we're not hearing anything in it? Do you think there's a lot of negotiations between lawyers going on and they're trying to find a way around it? I do tend to feel that what Ben says is that the TV money is the playing factor. I think it's got to be something to do with the piracy. It's got to be something to do with that. That's just me thinking out aloud.
But Steve, who has the loophole? It's the Premier League that have it.
Yeah.
Because a deal happens and the Premier League can say, no, there's the loophole.
Yeah.
They can actually say no to something that's been completed. And they can say, you can't have anything to do with that club here in the Premier League. And so the loophole remains with the Premier League. And so you have to get it done right and in the right order. Otherwise, it ain't going to happen. You can do the deal, but the Premier League aren't, you know, that let's just say that the Saudis and Mike Ashley completed the whole situation. What would the Premier League have done? They could have said, you can't go in that dressing room, in the boardroom at Newcastle United. We don't want you there. So, would they expel Newcastle United? You know, we haven't reached that point, or rather, the Premier League haven't yet reached that point on anything.
Yeah.
But they could have got very close to it if the deal had been done without their ratification.
I think it's a smart move on their behalf. I think they've moved away from this, but it's how they've moved away. They say they've withdrawn, and I think it's now in the hands of lawyers. I think we'll get a resolve on this. And either way, I think I'm at the point now where if you know, Amanda and the consortium do get a knockback, but they've tried everything, every which way but loose to get it done. Fair play to them. It didn't happen, but at least we know she was genuine and we can move on from that. You know, Is Henry Morris real? I don't think any of us believe so. If he was, he would have been here and doing something within this last 4 weeks. He hasn't been. You know, is there somebody else? Is there somebody else waiting in the wings? But you know, got to face reality. If this doesn't go through, we're stuck with Mike Ashley, as John said.
Yes, but what has surprised me in all of this is that, considering the situation that all businesses are facing, everybody is facing right now, because of this pandemic, that Newcastle United, by being taken over, they were promising, I think, £200 million for the transfer market for the first 3 years. That's £600 million, way in excess of £500 million. That money would have spread around the game over those 3 years. Football can't afford not to have it. Mm-hmm. And so I just wonder if that can, if the Saudis had stayed in the process and just kept chipping away, in the end, there would have been a pressure. The top six didn't want it, but that money coming in to all of football, by heavens, it's one of those lifelines that is vital to keep football strong and working.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Well, the clock's beating us, guys, and I've got to go and have my tea and have a drink, because I'm doing a bit of moonlighting away from you guys after this. At 8 o'clock, I'm getting your good friend on, Ian Lafreniere.
Ian.
Yeah.
My fondest regards. He is a lovely, lovely guy. He really is.
I will do. So I'm going to be back on at 8 o'clock to have a chat with Ian about, the fantastic entertainment he's given us with the likes of Porridge and Auf Wiedersehen, Pet, and Open All Hours and the Likely Lads. But of course, most of you who are of a younger age probably wouldn't have known that. And he's also a big Newcastle fan. And he's promised that he would come on the show. So he's coming on tonight. It'll be great to have him on and to chew the fat with him live from LA. But I will pass on your best regards, lads, because I know you're great pals.
Yes, indeed. Oh,
absolutely,
great guy.
Absolutely. And to Newcastle fans, by the way, all the Newcastle fans, keep the faith. It ain't over yet.
Great stuff. Great way to end, guys. I'll see you next Thursday. Have a good week. Hopefully it'll all be done by then. Take care, lads.
Indeed. Good night, everybody.